creating visual texture paper using crayons and markers. We're going to do some rubbings for this one, so find some of those old broken crayons and take their wrappers off. Now, if you're lucky enough to have bought texture plates, you can pull those out. I happen to have some, and they're basically just plates that if you touch them, you can feel the texture. It has physical texture. But if you don't have those, you got to find some things. So around your house, there's going to be so many things that if you just touch them, they have texture. Things that are higher, things that are lower. You can have large objects or small objects like coins or buttons. I found this. It's a grilling sheet. I love it with all the holes. So I'm going to do this one first. I'm going to place it underneath my paper, take my crayon sideways, and just rub it back and forth. Areas that are higher, my crayon hits and crayon comes off. Areas that are lower, the crayon can't hit and none of it is removed onto the paper. I'm going to take this fabric pencil case and place it underneath. It had netting on it, so when I rub the crayon on top of that, I get some texture. Some lines appear, and that's where there's kind of ridges on the case. I notice there are these holes here. If I place my paper on top of them, since they're protruding, sticking up, I can use them to create rubbings as well. I could use the zipper. I could use so many parts of that pencil case. I'm going to take this plate and add it to this texture paper. So I place the plate underneath. Now I have one paper with multiple patterns and textures. Here I'm going to grab some buttons. Now if I lay them down on the table, put my paper over them, they're going to move because they're not attached. You could glue them down to a board if you wanted to create a specific pattern, but what I'll probably just use one at a time and place it underneath something to add some interest to a different paper. For example, I have this paper that was created using watercolor and a salt technique on it. And now I'm going to add some more interest to it by using the buttons and placing them underneath and then doing a crayon rubbing, which will create some visual texture. With my crayons, I don't have to do rubbings. I could just use the crayon from different directions and create a very interesting pattern, right? Very interesting visual texture. I've turned my crayon on the side and done some lines. I've turned the crayon to the pointy side and been able to do some nice crisp lines. The idea though is pattern, pattern, pattern. Repeat your elements. I repeated lines, I repeated values, I repeated shapes. I could do a similar thing with markers. I've got my marker, I'm doing some dotted vertical lines, I'm doing some wavy vertical lines where the value is changed. I'm taking in different colors, so different thicknesses and different lengths of lines for this one is pretty much how I'm creating this visual texture. Repeating, repeating, repeating. Physical texture occurs when an object has indented and raised areas. We are trying to create something that looks like there's indented and raised areas. So a way to successfully create visual texture is to repeat elements but vary value and size. For example, length and width. Here are some other examples of texture papers that I've created using paints, watercolors, and tempers. If you'd like to see how they were created, check out those videos.